Alright guys, what's up? So yeah, it's been a little bit since I posted a video, but hopefully I can start putting them out a little bit more productively. Honestly, the biggest problem that I'm having right now is figuring out a time where I can do these videos, because I live with my roommates, and so I don't really know like how to navigate that. Like, if someone's upstairs watching a movie, it's kind of annoying for someone just to be rambling off talking to their camera downstairs. And also the other thing is like super self-conscious about it, and so I have a hard time expressing myself because I'm like worried about, man, they must think I'm an idiot, especially because this is the non-edited stuff. So I mean, like when I put it on YouTube, I make sure that it's the stuff that I wanted to say, but here, man, I've said some of the randomest crap. Anyways, the video that I wanted to do today is about memorization. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, is just how frustrating it is to learn something and then like literally a day later, you don't even remember it. It's been a common thing for me throughout my studies of biology for the past 3 years at the university, where it's just, I get a class, they throw out all this stuff in a PowerPoint and all these lectures, and then I don't really study it, and then at the end I just kind of like cram a bunch of things, put it out on the test, and call it a day. That's basically been my college experience, and that's another video. But the point is I'll study a bunch of crap and then I'll put it on the test, and then like 2 days later I don't remember anything that I learned. And throughout the 3 years that I've studied biology, I mean, I can tell you that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but other than stuff like that, I really don't even know what I'm talking about. And that's crazy to think that like I finished a bachelor's degree in biology, and I'm like barely above like what a common person would know. Like I don't even, you spent 4 years on this crap and that's all you know, like that kind of feeling. So it kind of creates two questions. The first is, what's the point of memorizing anything if we forget it? And the second is memorization the best thing to use? Is it valuable in your studies? So I think one of the biggest discoveries about memorization came from Ebbinghaus in his studies on himself, where he would take 3-letter nonsensical words and try and memorize them, and then he would make charts of his retention of the words. And so he's really famous for the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, where he starts out knowing 100% of the material, and then like a day later he knows like 50%, and then by the end of a month he knows 20% of the things that he'd memorized. And obviously it's nonsensical words, so maybe you wouldn't depreciate that much in your memorization if you learn something that you're kind of familiar with and you can make a lot of connections with. But the idea is that like, not so much the numbers as much as the curve, where you literally knew everything and then in no time at all, you barely know any of it. So then the other thing that Ebbinghaus learns through his studies is, if he starts spacing out his learning, all of a sudden that curve is not so steep. So the first time he memorizes it, it's gonna drop quite a bit. But if he reviews it a day or a few days later, all of a sudden the curve doesn't depreciate as fast. And so like a month later, now he knows like 50%. And if he does it, 4 or 5 times, where he reviews the material periodically, all of a sudden the depreciation in memorization is not nearly as severe. And so you start to feel like, okay, I actually learned this stuff. That kind of like brings out the idea of like, is memorization worthwhile? And if you're just memorizing something, putting on a test, and then not looking at it again, then probably not. You're just wasting your time. But if you really want to learn this stuff and you spend days reviewing it, then all of a sudden you start to really learn things and it sticks with you. Okay, so I read a couple of books from the psychology world, and one of them was by Kevin Horsley called Unlimited Memory. He's an international grandmaster of memorization, and he just went through basically a bunch of tips and tricks that he learned that helped him a lot with memorization. A lot of it was like techniques, like memory palaces, where you have a bunch of places in your house and then you attach things that you want to memorize with that, and then all you have to do is go through your house and you remember everything that you needed to remember. And he do a bunch of things like pegging systems or stories. He'd go through like a little roadmap of the things that he was trying to do. And it was all of a sudden a lot easier to memorize it. So the biggest thing that I got from Kevin Horsley's book is there are a ton of techniques for memorization, and they're very valuable techniques and worth learning and then applying in your memorization. But also, no matter how you memorize, what's most important is creating stories and connections. And as you start to do that, all this, and you start to apply everything into your life, all of a sudden, like, the memorization of it is not bad at all. So then I wanted to add a little bit more from Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman. His book just talked a little bit about intuition that I wanted to add for this memorization thing. And it's interesting because he talked about how, like, firefighter chiefs, they can go into a room and they can kind of just sense that, like, they need to get out because the floor is going to collapse or something like that. They're considered experts. Or a chess master, he can look at a board real quick and know, like, 2 or 3 powerful moves right off the bat. And that's really the beauty of the mind, is being able to take all these things that you've memorized over the years and putting them all together and making connections with those that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do with a computer or with something else. It's kind of what makes you you. It's all these things that you've gathered from your experiences on this world that you've brought together. And the more that you can remember and recall to your mind of the experiences that you had, the better you are able to make connections. So this is kind of like what's been all the rage in the universities, is critical thinking. And that is basically what critical thinking is taking all these ideas that you've learned from the liberal arts and bringing them together and then making connections and contributing something to society. That's like the goal of going to college. But then the reality of it is you end up spending a bunch of time memorizing stuff, and then you forget it all and you don't make those connections. In order to have critical thought, you have to have things to think about. And so you do have to spend that time memorizing stuff. You need to take responsibility for your memorization. And if you're just cramming for tests, like myself, then you're wasting your time. We need to start spacing things out. We need to start using techniques that are out there for us to use and really start memorizing the information that is going through our heads. And with that, our critical thinking is going to develop considerably. So one of the things that I really like having is a commonplace book where you just kind of write a bunch of things that come to your mind, just ideas that maybe you want to make a YouTube video of, or ideas that you want to do research on. It's different from a journal because in the book, you're not really talking about what you did that day. Like, you're not like, oh, I went to the pool today. It's just kind of like writing ideas down. So this is an interesting connection that I found from psychology that applies to biology. The plan I have with like this memorization thing is to take my commonplace book a little bit more seriously. After I read a book, I'm going to take away certain ideas from that book. I'm going to write questions that I found answers to, or maybe questions that I now have because I read that book. And I'm going to then try and answer those questions. And I think that's going to really help, first of all, in memorization, because I'm now reviewing the material, and then also critical thinking, because I'm taking all this information that I learned, putting it in a spot, and then making new ideas from those things. It really doesn't matter how you make your book, but like I like it on my phone because I can just whip it out and write something down really quick. That is all I have for today. Thank you for watching. I'm really hoping that these videos get better, because right now I feel like I'm just mumbling a bunch of crap and I can't focus. Right now it just feels like I'm all over the place, but hopefully they get better and I can start to make more concise points. I don't want to give up the authenticity of just talking. You know, I don't want to just read something, trying to find this line between knowing what I'm going to say and not knowing what I'm going to say so well that I can't like just say things. Gosh, it's awful. When I talk, it's just, when I write things down, it makes so much more sense. You know what I'm saying? Oh gosh.